which is better, AMD or Intel? They're the same in terms of, if you get one or the other, it doesn't really make much of a difference in terms of day-to-day usage. So they're on par. And if I had a choice between I have an Intel or AMD, laptop with the exact same specs, I would go for AMD. Intel versus AMD. What is the difference? I actually don't know. I have no idea. I know most devices come with an Intel i5, i7, i9. I haven't seen anything above the i9, but normally the i5s are more standard, generic business grade computers. i3s are more the cheap and cheerful end, and the i9s are more like the UI designer. I know on the AMD side there's the Ryzen 3, Ryzen 5, Ryzen 9, and they're meant to compete with the Intel side of things. And I know that recently AMD have been, their Ryzen processors are more efficient than the Intel ones, so they run at a lower power ratio. But I don't know what the differences would be in terms of like a day-to-day usage kind of situation. So let's watch a video. Let's find out. Intel versus AMD. Let's go.
As much as AMD and Intel fanboys like to scream at each other online, the average user would be hard-pressed to notice the difference between these companies' CPUs in everyday use.
I just said that, literally. What is the difference? On my Intel laptop, I know there's like an Intel graphics command where I can like change settings and stuff. I don't know how AMD works. Have I ever used an AMD computer without realizing it?
Unless you're like us and benchmark things religiously. But on the inside, modern chips from Team Red and Team Blue are built quite differently.
Okay.
So let's take a look at how, starting with AMD. Ryzen CPUs are made up of at least one core complex, or CCX. But don't worry, despite the name, it's not a complex
I'm getting confused. What's a CCX? A core complex, okay.
thing to understand. A CCX is just a group of cores along with some cache memory. Newer Zen 3 chips have CCXs with 8 cores, while Zen 2 CPUs have 4 cores per CCX. Each CCX lives on a chiplet called a CCD. The setup on...
This is a little bit confusing. CCX and CCDs. So a CCX, this one has 8 cores. Anyway, I'm still confused with what the differences are. Maybe I'm pausing too early.
Zen 3 is pretty straightforward. 1 CCX per CCD with up to 2 CCDs per processor for a total of 16 cores. On Zen 2, each CCD can instead hold 2 of these smaller CCXs, resulting in the same 16-core maximum. But
I see.
what links all these core complexes together? Well, you've probably heard of AMD's Infinity Fabric, which is their secret sauce bus that can run between CCXs or between CCDs.
Maybe this is where I was saying that the AMDs can run at a lower power compared to Intel. Because on the Intel side, they need a slightly higher power input to run. But Intel's been dominating for so long. Anyway, let's see.
Although it's a high-speed interconnect that works pretty well, with Ryzen beating out competing Intel chips in a good number of benchmarks, it's still not as fast as having the cores more directly connected, as there's higher latency with Infinity Fabric and the connection is serial rather than parallel. But there are real benefits to this approach. One is that the smaller chiplets mean big cost savings due to better yield.
Okay.
If one chiplet is bad, you can discard just that one chiplet without wasting as much silicon from throwing away a whole CPU. This CCX plus Infinity Fabric approach also scales quite well, so you can just add more chiplets if you need more cores
I see.
instead of spending more time. So, Intel, in contrast to AMD, still uses monolithic chip designs, where cores are right next to each other, at least for the time being. This approach allows the cores to talk with each other more directly, but it has the opposite problems as AMD's chiplet design. Lower yield, less scalability, and higher costs.
The thing about AMD and Intel is, with a lot of manufacturers, in terms of, let's say you want to buy a Dell Precision or Latitude or a Lenovo laptop or anything like that, even a PC, you can configure them to have either AMD or Ryzen. Default, they are Intel. Sorry, not AMD or Ryzen, Intel or AMD, because Ryzen is AMD. So yes, so you can, from the manufacturer, request to install AMD and not Intel. There are benefits in both. I know historically the naming conventions were very difficult in terms of, okay, I have an i5 and I want a Ryzen XZ. It was so bad. But recently they have changed the naming conventions. So yeah, you can choose an AMD PC, laptop, computer from the manufacturer's point of view. And most PCs have the options between Intel and AMD. I'm not gonna lie, I would still go with Intel just because of what I know. And it's like, probably AMD is better nowadays in terms of, running on lower power. It's a bit faster, and on benchmarks it does beat Intel. But it's, seeing that Intel logo, it's like, oh yeah, I know what this is. I have that previous experience with the i5. I got an i7 now, so I know it's gonna be faster. Whereas if you go with a Ryzen 3 and then a Ryzen 9, you'd be like, maybe it's just in my head, I haven't connected those two things. So if I get a i3 Intel and then go to a Ryzen 9 PC, obviously the Ryzen's faster, but in my head I'd be like, they're different. But maybe it's a psychological thing, and that's why probably Intel still dominates a little bit, even though AMD's better currently at the moment. Let's continue. In terms of benchmarking.
But Team Blue isn't going to be left behind as the industry moves towards chiplets, except they call them tiles instead, because they just had to be
tiles.
In 2023, we're expecting a lineup of mainstream processors called Meteor Lake, based on tiles connected by something called EMIBs, which unfortunately is a way less cool name than Infinity Fabric. In fact, we've already seen EMIBs in the Kaby Lake G processors from a few years ago, which used EMIBs to connect the built-in Radeon GPU to its HBM memory, as well as in Intel's Ponte Vecchio supercomputer chips. Intel thinks it's a more elegant solution to AMD's, even going so far as basketball courts snap into place. And unlike Infinity Fabric, EMIB monolithic chip design.
Okay, I'm being lost here. From what I can see, there is no difference between AMD and Intel. Similar processors. Benchmarking, AMD can win sometimes, Intel can win at another time. So it's just, if you get an AMD Ryzen 7, Ryzen 9, Ryzen 3 compared to an Intel i5, i9, i7, all those type of, processors, I don't even think you can tell a difference in day-to-day running. I think unless you go into the graphics command or go into like the settings in your BIOS and stuff, you will not even know you have an AMD or an Intel, unless your PC or laptop has that sticker on it. So what's the differences? How they're manufactured. That's the differences. How they manage data. But would you see a difference? Oftentimes the AMDs are cheaper than the Intels. So if price is a factor and you won't see a difference, and it might even be better, it might just be a bit better, go for the AMD. Save a bit of money. You won't see any issues. That's my thoughts. Which is better, AMD or Intel? They're the same in terms of, if you get one or the other, it doesn't really make much of a difference in terms of day-to-day usage. So they're on par. And if I had a choice between I have an Intel or AMD, laptop with the exact same specs, I would go for AMD. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. What do you think? Comment down below. Peace.